A billionaire's twin daughters had lived in silence since birth. Autism kept them locked in a world no doctor could reach. "We've tried everything," specialists told their father, one of the richest men in the country. "You must accept it will never change." But William Carter refused to give up. He spent millions, built therapy rooms, and hired experts from around the globe, yet his daughters never smiled, never spoke. Then came Mary Ann, a new maid with no medical degree, no special training, only patience and quiet courage. "I don't need them to perform," she whispered. "I just want to be near them." Days turned into weeks, and then she noticed something no one else had. The girl's eyes followed the sound of horses on a television screen. Trusting her instincts, she took them to a countryside farm. As the wind whipped across the pasture, the twins touched the mane of a horse, and suddenly laughter burst from their lips, clear and bright. Mary Ann's eyes filled with tears. And then the impossible happened. Eliza turned, looked at her father, and said one word, "Daddy." The billionaire fell to his knees, sobbing, holding his daughters as if afraid they might vanish. "I've waited my whole life for this," he cried. And it hadn't come from money or medicine, but from love, risk, and faith. Support us by subscribing and share in the comments. Where are you listening to this story of resilience tonight? The October air over northern Texas had a faint crispness, the kind that hinted at winter waiting just beyond the horizon. The sky stretched wide and pale, brushed with high, thin cirrus that looked like white smoke smudged by a painter's thumb. In the distance, the sprawl of Dallas gleamed with its towers of glass and steel, humming with late-morning traffic. But 30 minutes north, beyond toll roads and subdivisions, the Carter estate rose from manicured green acreage like a fortress of wealth and silence. The house itself was a modern ranch of pale limestone and long glass panes, austere and geometric, with a driveway coiling past trimmed hedges toward heavy iron gates. To an outsider, it looked like the picture of perfection, a place where nothing could possibly be missing. And yet, the closer one came, the clearer the absence became. A house so large should have echoed with laughter, but the Carter estate had not heard that sound in years. Inside, the smell of lemon polish lingered faintly on oak floors. The kitchen was cavernous, with a marble island wide enough for a banquet, though it was set for only 3. The refrigerator hummed softly, the stove blinked a digital clock, and all around the room were signs of domestic order: clean counters, neatly arranged mugs, not a single toy left astray. Standing at the island was William Carter, the master of this house, though he often felt more its prisoner than its owner. William was 45, tall, lean from the habit of running, though his shoulders sagged these days under invisible weight. His hair, black once, had begun to salt with silver at the temples, and his face was sharply cut, square jaw, straight nose, gray eyes that seemed to belong more to a boardroom than to a nursery. In photographs he looked confident, commanding. In person, he seemed perpetually on the edge of exhaustion, as though carrying 2 lives in his hands and terrified of dropping them. Once, William had been one of Dallas's brightest business figures, a self-made billionaire from software ventures, featured on magazine covers, with his wife smiling by his side. But his wife was gone now. Grace Carter, the light of his life and his empire, no longer mattered. What consumed him now was the care of their twin daughters, Emma and Eliza. The girls sat side by side at the island, 7 years old, mirror images in form if not in every detail. Both were delicate, small for their age, with pale blonde hair and eyes the blue of Texas sky in summer. Emma wore hers straight, parted neatly in the middle, while Eliza's curled stubbornly at the ends. Their dresses were soft cotton, one sea green, the other pale blue, paired with leggings and socks that forever slipped off their heels. They were beautiful, angelic, but their beauty came wrapped in silence. Their eyes rarely settled on the world outside. They seemed always to gaze inward, lost in a place no one else could enter. They rarely spoke, rarely smiled, rarely reached out even to one another. Autism had drawn a veil between them and the world, and no amount of money had yet found a way to lift it. Good morning, Emma. Good morning, Liz, William said softly as he placed plates before them. Toast cut into triangles, bowls of strawberries, small cups of yogurt with spoons. He smiled, though he knew there would be no response. The sky's clear today. No contrails. That means fewer planes. He tried to sound casual, the way other fathers might chatter at breakfast. But here his words fell into the room like pebbles into a well, swallowed by silence. Emma picked up a strawberry, stared at it as if cataloging its seed freckles. Eliza turned her spoon over, watching a ribbon of yogurt drip slowly, fascinated by the texture more than the taste. Neither looked at him. Neither spoke. William's heart ached, but he let his smile stay, gentle and unbroken. Patience was the only currency he had left. At the far side of the kitchen, a woman moved quietly, folding napkins. This was Mrs. Delaney, the housekeeper, 54, compact in stature with auburn hair cut neatly above the shoulder, her Irish complexion pale and dusted with freckles. Her eyes were gray, kind but always measured, as though she feared too much cheerfulness might fracture the fragile calm of the household. Mrs. Delaney had been with the Carters since before the twins were born. She had seen the rise of William's career, the warmth of Grace's presence, the devastating loss that followed. She had changed from brisk and practical to hushed and protective after the funeral, carrying grief not her own like a secret weight. She loved the twins in her quiet way, always careful not to overwhelm them, treating them as a gardener tends fragile orchids, with restraint and gentleness. "I'll warm their vests for therapy," she murmured, lifting two small weighted vests from the counter. William nodded his thanks. Every gesture in this house was soft, measured, cautious. The Carter estate contained more therapy rooms than most clinics. Down one hallway, past family portraits that now felt like memorials, was the sensory integration room. A padded floor, fiber optic lights cascading like fallen stars, bins of textured beads, and a bubble column that gurgled softly. Next door was the speech therapy room, painted in pastel blues, its shelves filled with picture cards and sound-making toys. Here, Daniela Alvarez, the speech pathologist, prepared the day's session. Daniela was 38, with cinnamon dark hair braided over her shoulder, tan skin, and warm hazel eyes behind slim glasses. She dressed in bright, practical clothes that children might find comforting. Today, a teal blouse and gray slacks. Daniela had the kind of smile that radiated reassurance but never pushed itself. She knew too much cheer could startle the twins. She had grown up caring for an ailing father in a poor Houston neighborhood, which gave her a core of steel hidden beneath her compassion. "We'll try 10 minutes today, Mr. Carter," she said gently. "Any longer may overwhelm them." William agreed, grateful for her realism. Across the hall, the occupational therapy room awaited. There, Evan Pike, 32, arranged puzzles. Evan was tall and broad-shouldered, with straw blonde hair and forearms like a rock climber's. His face was perpetually cheerful, even when serious, a quirk that had lost him girlfriends but won him children's trust. He had once been a janitor in a rehab center before retraining, and he never forgot how children had taught him that half inches of progress could mean everything. Today he laid out a turtle puzzle. "Morning, ladies," he said in his Texas drawl. "This turtle's Hank. Yours can be Hank, too." The twins gave no sign they'd heard, but Evan logged the absence of flinching as data. Later that morning came Dr. Malcolm Howard, pediatric neurologist, 51, silver-haired, tall, his charcoal suit perfectly pressed, tortoiseshell glasses perched on his nose. He carried himself like a man both scientist and statesman, his voice a calm baritone. Dr. Howard had seen hundreds of children like Emma and Eliza, and though he offered no miracles, families trusted his honesty. Years earlier, his own daughter's brief misdiagnosis had scarred him with humility, making him cautious with predictions. He reviewed the twins' EEGs, found nothing new, advised patience and structure. "We redefine progress," he told William as they walked to the door. "We keep the world predictable, and from time to time we hide pearls in the sawdust. William gave a tired smile. Redefining progress was what I did for shareholders. Now it's for my daughters. Dr. Howard nodded. Then you are more qualified than most. The day moved as it always did, measured by appointments, exercises, attempts, small failures labeled as data points. The estate thrummed with professionals and equipment, yet its corridors were hushed like a hospital at night. Even the grounds outside were orchestrated. Hank Bowman, the groundskeeper, late 40s, freckled, long-limbed, moved quietly with rake and mower, his Denton drawl mild as honey. He scheduled his machines around nap times, trimmed hedges with almost priestly reverence. William appreciated him more than Hank ever knew. And padding softly through the halls was Scout, the family's Labrador retriever, 9 years old, tan coat graying around the muzzle, hips stiff with arthritis but eyes gentle and loyal. Scout had been adopted from a rescue after Grace's death, a dog returned by another family. Perhaps he understood abandonment. He certainly understood patience. He shadowed the twins, alert but calm, lying beside them like a silent guardian. His slow tail thump was sometimes the only sign of life in a room. By evening, the house had consumed its ration of optimism. The twins had tolerated their therapies, but offered little more. Daniela had coaxed an from Emma during a song, and Evan celebrated 3 seconds of sustained hand use. Dr. Howard had changed nothing. For outsiders, these results looked like failure. For William, they were fragments of hope, collected like rare coins. He stood by the living room window, watching a hawk drift above the tree line. Beyond the glass, the prairie stretched vast and indifferent. Inside, his daughters sat quietly, one with a silicone popper toy, the other lying on a crash mat, cheek pressed to vinyl as if feeling the hum of the house itself. After the staff left and the gates whispered shut, Mrs. Delaney dimmed the lights until the house glowed like amber. She left a casserole, a quilt folded by the sofa, and a note in her looping script, "Call if you need me," with a small heart drawn discreetly. William wheeled the twins into the family room and played a piano playlist. Sati, Glass, a soft lullaby. He sat between them, narrating the weather for tomorrow, a ritual that steadied him more than them. High of 72, wind from the north, clear skies. Emma blinked once. Eliza's fingers twitched. That was all. Later, upstairs, he checked on them as they slept under weighted blankets stitched with constellations. He read aloud from a picture book, though they did not look, because words, he told himself, built roads even when no one drove them yet. Their breathing deepened, steady, and he tucked blankets under their chins the way Grace once had. For a fleeting second, it felt like the past could be reached if only he knew the latch. He went to the den at the back of the house, the one room still human amid the decorator's perfection. On the mantel hung a gallery frame of 9 squares. Ultrasound, swaddle, first steps, the 4 of them together in sunlight. Grace, tall and athletic, her laughter caught mid-frame, daisies tucked behind the twins' ears. William stood before it, his throat tight. He whispered questions no one could answer, whether money had any meaning here, whether anything could cross the distance to his daughters' hearts. He had bought devices, hired specialists, built entire therapy wings, yet silence remained. All he wanted was a single syllable with his name in it. Upstairs, the girls slept near, yet impossibly far. The wind picked up outside, a coyote called across the prairie, and the house exhaled into the quiet. William touched the edge of the frame as though it were sacred, then let his hand fall. Alone, he admitted what he never said aloud. He did not know how to cross the glass wall between his daughters and himself. The first week of November arrived in Dallas with skies that could not decide between gray and blue, as if autumn were reluctant to surrender to winter's authority. A faint drizzle had passed before dawn, leaving the Carter estate's limestone walls streaked with darker veins, and the scent of damp earth lingered across the lawns where the sprinklers no longer ran as often. The mansion was awake but hushed, its rooms alive with routines that had become rituals, weighted blankets folded, therapy schedules pinned to corkboards, fresh fruit sliced for breakfast, though it would go mostly uneaten. Into this rhythm entered a new figure, unannounced to the girls and only half welcomed by their father, though he had hired her himself, Marianne Brooks. She arrived in a battered red Ford pickup whose body was mottled with patches of primer paint, evidence of too many winters salted with Kentucky roads. Marianne was 29, tall and willowy with a kind of practical grace, the sort of presence one noticed not because it demanded attention but because it absorbed the space quietly. Her hair was chestnut brown, worn in a long braid that trailed over one shoulder. Her eyes, moss green, carried both alertness and fatigue, as if they had seen more than they should have for her age. Her skin was pale, freckled along the bridge of her nose, and though she had the youthful shape of someone still in their 20s, her expression carried an older weight. She wore a simple denim jacket over a faded plaid shirt, dark jeans tucked into worn work boots. There was no polish in her appearance, no designer perfume, only the faint smell of hay and lavender soap that clung to her clothes, ghosts of a life she had not yet escaped. Marianne's voice, when she greeted Mrs. Delaney at the door, was soft and low-pitched, Kentucky lilt woven faintly through. She was polite but not effusive, answering questions directly, her hands folded in front of her as though she did not wish to intrude. Mrs. Delaney, who had seen many young women arrive and fail in this position, studied her with a professional eye. She noticed the way Marianne's shoulders were relaxed, how she didn't peer around curiously or chatter nervously. The housekeeper approved, though she gave only a nod. William met her in his office, a tall room lined with shelves of unread books. He was dressed, as usual, in dark trousers and a crisp shirt rolled to the elbows, his hair combed but already loosening. He looked at Marianne the way one evaluates an investment, cautious, skeptical, prepared for disappointment. He explained the duties with clipped precision: light cooking, cleaning, keeping order in rooms where the twins might wander. "You're not expected to teach them," he said firmly. "They have therapists. Your job is presence, routine, nothing more." Marianne nodded. She did not tell him that she had no intention of teaching, that she had already learned from experience how children could shrink from forced kindness. Instead, she answered simply, "I understand, sir." Later that morning, she was introduced to Emma and Eliza. The girls sat in the sensory room on the crash mat, their legs drawn up, fiddling with soft toys. Marianne entered slowly, without comment, carrying a basket of laundry. She did not smile widely or bend toward them the way so many caregivers did, nor did she call their names. She merely set the basket down, folded a towel, and moved quietly about the room. The girls did not turn away, did not stiffen. They simply allowed her presence. William, standing in the doorway, noticed. That in itself was unusual. As days passed, Marianne established her rhythm. She swept floors, prepared meals, folded the endless rotation of therapy vests and blankets. She sang softly to herself while dusting, though never loudly enough to disturb the children. When she was in the same room with them, she behaved as if they were not fragile creatures to be coaxed into performance, but simply children existing as they were. That absence of demand was new in the Carter household, and somehow it changed the air. Emma and Eliza did not laugh, but they did not retreat either. Sometimes, when Marianne sat in a chair by the window after her work was done, Emma would glance toward her braid swinging against her shoulder, and Eliza would shift a little closer on the mat. These were minute things, but to William, they were more startling than 1,000 hours of therapy. At night, when the house was quiet and the gates locked, Marianne sat on the narrow bed in her small room at the far wing of the house. She unpacked her few belongings slowly: 2 pairs of jeans, a stack of flannel shirts, a photo album whose edges were worn. Inside the album were pictures of horses grazing on sunlit hills, her father's weathered face beneath a cowboy hat, her mother's hands rough but gentle on a foal's mane. They had died 3 years ago on a rain-slicked road in Kentucky when a semi lost its brakes. She had been the one to identify their bodies. That moment carved a line down her life, before and after. Since then, she carried the ache of loss like a stone in her pocket. The farm had been sold to cover debts, the horses scattered to auctions. Marianne left with only the clothes on her back and a sorrow that no one in town knew how to soothe. She worked odd jobs, waitress, cashier, temporary cleaner, until she found her way here. She told herself she came to Dallas to escape, to find wages good enough to start anew. But deep down, she knew she was still searching for something to heal the hollow her parents had left. In the early evenings, when she finished her duties, she sometimes sat on the back steps with Scout, the Labrador. Scout had accepted her immediately, nosing her palm with gentle insistence, then lying at her feet as if to share unspoken company. He was 9 years old, with fur fading around the muzzle and eyes that seemed to know too much. When he sighed in his sleep, she thought of the horses back home, the steady rhythm of animals that never pretended to be more than they were. Scout gave her a sense of belonging that no human yet had. It was during one of these dusks that she met Sarah Jensen, the Carter Estate's part-time gardener. Sarah was 36, tall and slim with shoulders slightly stooped from years of outdoor work. Her sandy blonde hair was cropped to her chin, her blue eyes sharp, though kindness softened their edges. She wore worn khaki trousers and a faded work shirt, sleeves rolled to reveal sinewed forearms. Sarah had once been a high school teacher before her younger brother's death in Afghanistan unraveled her life. The grief made classrooms unbearable, and she left the city for simpler work in the soil. Though she spoke little, her presence was steady, a mixture of independence and quiet empathy. She approached Marianne on the steps, carrying a tray of seedlings. "You're the new one," she said in a voice husky from years of shouting against the wind. "Yes," Marianne answered, stroking Scout's ears. "Don't try too hard," Sarah advised. "Those girls know the difference between a show and the real thing." Marianne met her gaze. "I don't plan to try at all. Just to be here." Sarah gave a small approving nod. "That's more than most." Over the weeks, Marianne's routines blended into the house like a soft current. She cooked simple meals, soups, stews, cornbread that filled the kitchen with scents warmer than the sterile health food diets therapists often recommended. She left plates for William, though half the time he ignored them, consumed by reports or memories. She never pushed conversation on him, but sometimes, late in the evening when he passed through the hall, he found her humming softly as she folded linens. For reasons he could not explain, it eased him more than silence ever had. The girls began, in their subtle way, to acknowledge her. Emma once brushed her fingers against the hem of Marianne's sleeve as she passed. Eliza, one morning, sat closer to the chair where Marianne was reading quietly after chores, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. William, watching from a distance, found himself unsettled. For years, the twins had reacted to new staff with withdrawal or meltdowns. But with Marianne, there was no rejection. It was as if her very ordinariness, her absence of demand, allowed them a sliver of peace. Still, William did not trust easily. He scrutinized her background, reviewed her references, spoke with Mrs. Delaney about her work. Everything came back simple, unadorned. Marianne Brooks, Kentucky-born, only child, parents deceased. No scandals, no glowing achievements. Just a quiet woman with calloused hands and a history carved by loss. One night, when the estate had fallen into its hush, William passed by the den and saw Marianne sitting cross-legged on the rug, a photo album open in her lap. She did not see him in the doorway. The lamplight caught her face, softening the lines of weariness, and he realized she was looking at a photograph of herself as a girl beside a chestnut mare. The expression in her eyes, tenderness shaded by sorrow, was the same he sometimes saw in his own mirror when he looked at the last photograph of Grace. He withdrew quietly, but the image stayed with him. For Marianne, each day in the Carter estate was a balancing act between duty and memory. She carried out tasks with diligence, but whenever she saw Emma and Eliza so small, so withdrawn, she felt an ache like a mirror pressed against her own childhood self. She remembered standing in fields after her parents died, wishing someone would simply stay beside her in the silence. She understood instinctively that what the girls needed was not another cheerleader, not another therapist with targets and metrics, but someone who would remain, patient and steady, waiting with them rather than dragging them forward. By the end of her second week, William could no longer deny what he was seeing. The girls, though still mute and distant, seemed less agitated in Marianne's presence. The tension in their shoulders eased, their eyes wandered less wildly. It was not progress in any medical sense, but it was undeniable. One evening, as he passed the playroom, he paused in the doorway. Marianne was on her knees cleaning crayons from the floor while Emma and Eliza sat close, watching her quietly. There was no meltdown, no retreat, just three figures sharing space without conflict. William stood there longer than he intended, then finally walked away, whispering to himself, "Why them? Why her?" For now, he had no answer. The November nights around Dallas had grown longer, and the Carter estate seemed to hold its breath once the gates closed at dusk. In the family room, lamps threw mellow circles of light across shelves of toys that sat mostly untouched. The television had been left on low volume, running through an old DVD menu where horses thundered across a pasture, the loop repeating. Marianne Brooks, kneeling to gather crayons that Eliza had scattered, froze when she noticed both twins staring intently at the screen. Emma's eyes followed the horses with unusual steadiness. Eliza's fingers tapped the floor in rhythm with the hooves. For children who almost never fixed their gaze on moving images, this was a spark. Marianne's chest tightened. Horses had been her childhood warm breath on cold mornings, the musk of hay and leather, the sound of hooves against damp earth. They had been her escape and her joy before the accident on that rain-slick Kentucky road stole her parents and shattered the farm. She had buried those memories, but seeing Emma and Eliza's rare focus, she felt the old world stirring. An idea ignited, bold and reckless. If she could take them, just once, back to that world, even for 24 hours, they might awaken to something no therapist had managed. That night, in her small bedroom at the far wing of the mansion, Marianne sat on the edge of the bed, turning the thought over like a coin she knew she shouldn't spend. To take them without permission was unthinkable. William Carter would fire her, perhaps press charges. Yet she whispered into the dark, "If I don't try, I'll never forgive myself." The next morning she sought out Sarah Jensen, the part-time gardener, who was kneeling by a patch of winter pansies near the side gate. Sarah, 36, tall and lean with shoulders curved from years of stooping over soil, had sandy blonde hair cropped at her jaw and eyes that saw more than she spoke. She was a woman who carried her brother's death in Afghanistan like a permanent shadow. It had changed her once, a bright high school teacher, now quieter, withdrawn into the steady rhythm of gardening where nothing asked questions. Marianne crouched beside her. "Sarah, I need a favor," she said softly. Sarah wiped dirt from her palms, studying Marianne with those sharp blue eyes. "Depends what it is. I need your truck. Just for a day." 24 hours, Sarah's brow furrowed. "For the twins?" Marianne nodded. I think if I can take them to the farm where I grew up, let them see horses, touch them, it might stir something." Sarah sat back on her heels, exhaling slowly. "Marianne, if Carter finds out, you're finished. He doesn't even let them ride down the driveway without clearance. You'll not just lose your job, you'll end up in court." "I know," Marianne whispered, twisting her braid in her hands. "But I saw their eyes last night. They were watching, Sarah." "Really watching. I can't ignore that. Maybe it's not only for them. Maybe I need this too." For a long moment, Sarah said nothing. She was not one to offer comfort easily. Loss had taught her that words could not fill absence. Finally, she gave a reluctant nod. "The truck's old, transmission's fickle, but it'll get you there. If you're sure I'm sure," Marianne said, though her voice trembled. That evening, after William retreated to his office with stacks of unread reports, Marianne prepared. She packed a small bag with snacks the twins liked, apple slices, crackers, their favorite weighted blankets for comfort. She included a framed photo from her album, one of her father leading a chestnut mare across a sunlit pasture as if the memory itself could guide her. She crept down the hall, Scout padding behind her. The Labrador, with his graying muzzle and wise amber eyes, sensed the unusual energy. He whined softly, tail thumping once, then lay across the threshold of the twins' room as if offering a blessing of loyalty. Emma and Eliza were drowsy, their breaths steady. Marianne gently lifted them, wrapped them in their blankets, whispered promises they could not yet understand. The truck rumbled awake under her hands, headlights cutting across the dark drive. She whispered a quick prayer to her parents, to the horses she had once known, to anything listening. The road stretched north, miles of highway glinting under sodium lamps, then fading into long stretches of rural dark. She kept the radio low, humming to herself, the twins quiet in the back seat, their faces soft in sleep. Each mile was a step back into her past, a return she had both dreaded and needed. Around midnight, she pulled into a small gas station at the edge of Denton, where neon lights buzzed against the silence. An old man behind the counter, Mr. Lyle, looked up as she entered. He had wiry gray hair sticking out beneath a cap, and the stooped frame of someone who had lifted too many boxes in younger years. "Traveling late," he muttered, scanning the twins through the window. "Just passing through," Marianne said, keeping her voice calm. She bought juice boxes and a map, though she knew the roads by memory. When she stepped back out, she felt the risk in her chest like a second heartbeat, but she kept moving. By dawn, they reached the outskirts of Lexington, Kentucky. The air was colder, sharper, and the sky carried a faint pink along the horizon. Rolling fields opened on either side, dotted with wooden fences and barns, silhouettes of horses already grazing. Marianne's throat closed at the sight. She had not been back since the funeral, had not thought she could bear it. But now, with Emma and Eliza stirring in the back seat, she felt something like purpose steady her trembling hands. She drove down a narrow lane until she reached a gate marked with a weathered sign, Hollow Creek Farm. The paint was chipped, but the sight was enough to bring tears to her eyes. This had been home. She parked, stepped out, inhaled deeply the smell of damp hay and autumn earth. The twins peered through the window, eyes wide, and for the first time in months, both leaned forward together. The barn door creaked open, and a man stepped out. John McLean, her father's old friend and neighbor. John was in his late 60s, tall but bent at the shoulders, his face carved by years of sun and wind. His gray beard was trimmed short, his eyes a soft hazel beneath a brow permanently furrowed by both laughter and grief. He wore overalls stained with years of work and carried a pitchfork as if it were an extension of himself. "Marianne," he called, disbelief in his tone. "Lord above, is that really you?" She hurried toward him, tears spilling freely. "It's me, John. I brought them. I brought." She gestured to the truck, where Emma and Eliza watched with solemn curiosity. John's gaze softened. He had known her since she was a child, riding bareback on ponies too stubborn for their size. He set the pitchfork aside, pulled her into a rough embrace that smelled of hay and leather. "You should have come sooner," he murmured. "I couldn't," she admitted. "Until now." John studied the girls, then looked back at her. "They're quiet ones, aren't they?" "They're special," Marianne said softly. He nodded, understanding more than she expected. "Then let's give them something real." He led them inside the barn where the morning light slanted golden through slats. Horses shifted in their stalls, snorting, stamping, their breath clouds in the chill air. The twins froze at first, clutching their blankets, but Marianne knelt beside them. "It's all right," she whispered. "They're friends." Emma reached out slowly, her hand trembling, and touched the velvet nose of a bay gelding. The horse lowered its head, patient, accepting. Eliza followed, brushing her fingers across the mane, her lips parting in silent awe. For a moment, Marianne saw their eyes brighten, truly brighten, as if the glass wall around them had cracked. She wept silently, grateful for even this flicker. John leaned against the stall, watching. "They remind me of you," he said. Same searching eyes. Same silence. You needed the horses, and maybe they do too. Marianne nodded. She thought of her parents, of the fields she once ran through, of the ache that had never left. She realized that bringing the twins here was not only for them, it was for her, to reclaim something she had lost and to prove that healing could still happen. When the sun rose fully, casting long beams across the pasture, John saddled an old mare named Daisy. He looked at Marianne with a wry smile. "Still remember how to ride?" She laughed through tears. "Like breathing." Together they guided the twins closer, letting them touch the saddle, smell the leather, hear the gentle snort of the mare. Marianne whispered to them, her voice trembling with hope. "This is what made me feel alive once. Maybe it can do the same for you." And as the morning light filled the barn, she knew that within these 24 hours something had shifted. The Kentucky morning unfolded into brilliance, the sky polished blue after the pale pink of dawn had burned away. Mist clung low in the hollows of the rolling pasture, lifting slowly as the sun climbed. The smell of dew-soaked hay mingled with the earthy musk of horses, and a chorus of starlings burst from a fence-line oak, their wings a flicker of silver against the light. The Hollow Creek farm had not changed as much as Marianne Brooks feared. Weathered barns leaned a little more, fences sagged here and there, but the heart of the place horses, moving slowly in fields of emerald, remained intact. Emma and Eliza stood clutching the worn wooden fence, their small hands gripping the rails. They had never been so close to such massive animals. The twins, pale-haired angels who so rarely reacted to anything outside themselves, were trembling, not from fear, but from the charge of something new. Emma's lips twitched with the ghost of a smile. Eliza's eyes widened, reflecting the glint of sunlight off a bay mare's flank. Marianne's own chest rose and fell too quickly, as if her heart were trying to keep pace with theirs. John McLean, her father's old neighbor, appeared from the barn with a halter rope in one hand. He was tall but stooped, his back curved from years of labor, his face worn into leather by sun and wind. His hazel eyes, though set in folds of wrinkles, still shone with humor and kindness. A neatly kept gray beard covered his jaw, and his overalls carried the stains of oil and earth. In one pocket rested a red kerchief he had carried since his wife passed, a quiet symbol of a love that still guided him. John had always been a man of patient words and slow movements, which made him good with animals, and, Marianne realized, perhaps with children like Emma and Eliza. "Easy now," John said gently, leading forward a gelding named Buck, a chestnut with a white blaze down his nose and a mane that shimmered like copper in the sun. Buck was 20 but still sturdy, his gait calm, his eyes steady. He lowered his head toward the twins, as if recognizing the fragile air around them. Marianne crouched beside the girls, her braid falling over her shoulder, her moss-green eyes glistening. "This is Buck," she whispered. "He's gentle. He just wants to say hello." Emma lifted her hand tentatively, her fingers trembling. Buck's warm breath puffed against her skin, and she let out a small gasp. Then, like glass, cracking under warmth, her lips spread into a sudden giggle. Eliza, startled by her sister's sound, looked up at Marianne as though seeking permission, then reached out herself. When her hand brushed Buck's mane, she too laughed, a light bubbling sound that carried across the hillside. The sound struck Marianne like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She pressed her hand to her mouth, tears spilling free, overwhelmed by the miracle of those two small voices after years of silence. She had been prepared to wait months, years even, for something like this. Yet here it was. Laughter, bright and real, ringing against the wood and sky. John chuckled, his deep voice rolling like a creek. "Well now, that's music I haven't heard in this place since you were knee-high, Marianne." She looked at him, tears blurring her vision. "They've never laughed like that, John." "Not once. Not ever." He placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "And yet today they did. Sometimes you don't need science or money. Sometimes you just need a horse. Within an hour, John had saddled Daisy, an old mare with a dappled gray coat and soft eyes. She was calm enough to carry children without spooking. He lifted Emma carefully into the saddle while Marianne held her steady from one side and Eliza clutched her sister's hand. At first, Emma stiffened, her body rigid with uncertainty. But as Daisy stepped forward at a slow, measured pace, her hair caught the breeze and her mouth opened again in giggles. Eliza clapped, her face lit with joy. Marianne walked beside them, one hand on Emma's knee, her own eyes wet. She remembered herself at 9, riding bareback through the same pasture, her mother laughing behind her, her father shouting encouragement. For a moment, time folded, past and present overlapping in golden light. On the hill, where the fence opened to a sloping field dotted with wildflowers, Daisy climbed steadily. The wind rose, tossing the twins' hair like banners. They laughed together, high-pitched and radiant, their voices weaving into the air like the most natural music in the world. Marianne pressed her forehead against the mare's flank as she walked, her body shaking with sobs she refused to hide. This was the moment she had dreamed of. Proof that the girls' hearts had not closed forever, that their silence was not a cage without key. John walked at her other side, his steps slower than they once had been, but sure. "You see it now, don't you?" he said. She nodded, unable to speak. "You think you came back here for them," he continued, his voice quiet but strong. "But truth is, you came back for yourself too. You still carry the night your folks died like a weight around your neck. You never forgave fate for taking them, never forgave yourself for surviving. But look at those girls." Marianne lifted her eyes. Emma's face glowed in the sun. Eliza's arms stretched like wings as the mare climbed. Their laughter echoed across the pasture. "They needed someone patient enough to wait with them," John said. "And you, child, you needed someone to remind you you're still alive. Sometimes we heal by healing others." The words landed deep, like seeds pressing into soil. Marianne realized how long she had lived with guilt, how she had fled from Kentucky believing she could outrun sorrow. But here, with Emma and Eliza laughing on horseback, she felt something shift. The wound was not gone, but it had begun to breathe. As the ride ended and the girls were lifted down, both clung briefly to Daisy's mane, as if reluctant to part. Their faces shone with sweat and sun, their breaths quick, but their eyes, oh, their eyes sparkled with life Marianne had feared was gone forever. She hugged them both tightly, their small frames pressed against her, and whispered, "You did it. You really did it, Scout," who had followed them faithfully across the fields, wagged his tail so vigorously that dust rose from the dirt path. The old Labrador barked once, a deep, joyful sound, as if he too knew the world had shifted. That evening, John invited them into his modest farmhouse. The kitchen smelled of cornbread and strong coffee. The walls held photographs of horses long gone and a few of John's late wife, smiling with eyes that still warmed the room. Emma and Eliza curled on the braided rug with Scout nearby, calmer than Marianne had ever seen them, their hands moving over a wooden toy John fetched from a shelf. As she sipped coffee at the table, John studied her. "You've got a choice, Marianne. You can keep running from the hurt, or you can stay still long enough to let something new grow. Those girls, they're your second chance. Don't waste it." She set the cup down, her fingers trembling. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." John smiled, lines deepening around his eyes. "Strength doesn't mean you don't break. It means you keep showing up, even broken. And today, you showed up for them." Marianne turned to look at Emma and Eliza, who were quietly tapping a toy horse back and forth, their shoulders nearly touching. She realized John was right. Maybe she couldn't fix the past, but she could give these girls moments that might open doors inside them, and in doing so, she might finally forgive herself. Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the hills in amber and shadow. Horses grazed in silence, the land settling into evening. For the first time in years, Marianne felt the farm not as a grave of memories, but as a place still alive, capable of giving. And for the first time in their young lives, Emma and Eliza had laughed freely, their voices proof that hope had never truly left. The November sun in Texas rose into a sky the color of polished steel, cold despite its brightness. William Carter had returned from a meeting in Dallas 2 hours earlier than planned, his mind already reaching for the sanctuary of routine, the quiet breakfast table, the familiar silence of his daughters, the reports stacked in his study. But when he stepped into the cavernous foyer of the Carter estate, he knew something was wrong. The air felt hollow. The therapy wing, usually alive with scheduled order, was deserted. No soft hum of bubble tubes, no clatter of toys, no voices from staff. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time and found the twins' bedroom empty, their blankets gone. Panic pierced him with surgical precision. He called out, first gently, then louder. "Emma! Eliza!" No answer. He stormed down the hall, checked every room, then stumbled into the kitchen where Mrs. Delaney stood wringing her hands. Her normally composed face was pale. "They're not here, sir," she said in a whisper. "What do you mean, not here?" William's voice was a whip. "Mary Ann took them. She said she was going to run an errand." But that was last night. William's chest constricted. He grabbed his phone, dialing the local sheriff, but stopped before pressing the call through. A billionaire could not risk headlines of missing daughters. The world would devour him. Instead, he called his security consultant, a wiry man named Frank Daly, late 40s, ex-state trooper with the face of a hawk and eyes that missed nothing. Frank was lean, his short-cropped brown hair flecked with gray, his jaw lined with 2-day stubble. He had worked for Carter for 3 years, usually handling background checks, estate patrols, and the occasional drone survey of the property. "Track the truck," William snapped when Frank answered. Frank's voice was calm, grounded by years of handling adrenaline with procedure. "Already on it." Sarah Jensen lent her vehicle. GPS pinged in Kentucky. "Want me to call in locals?" "No," William said through clenched teeth. "I'll go myself. Meet me at the hangar." Within an hour, William was in his private jet, staring out at clouds that blurred into streaks. His mind burned with fury and betrayal. How could Mary Ann steal his daughters? How could he have let this happen under his roof? He thought of Grace, his late wife, imagined her voice condemning him for letting strangers near their children. His heart twisted. Meanwhile, on the Kentucky farm, Emma and Eliza were laughing still. Mary Ann walked beside Daisy the mare, her hands guiding the reins, while the girls sat perched in front of the saddle, their cheeks flushed with joy. Scout padded along happily, tail wagging, dust rising from his paws. John McLean leaned on the fence, his old eyes softened by the sight. "Haven't seen children so alive here since you were a girl, Mary Ann," he said. Mary Ann's throat tightened. "I only wanted them to feel it once. Just once." The moment was fragile, golden, held together by sunlight and laughter. It was broken by the growl of tires on gravel. A black SUV pulled up the drive, scattering chickens. William stepped out, his tall frame stiff as iron, his storm-gray eyes scanning until they locked onto his daughters. Behind him, Frank climbed out, clipboard in hand, his face unreadable. William's voice cracked the air like thunder. "What the hell is this?" The twins startled, their laughter cutting off as if sliced by a blade. Mary Ann froze, Daisy shifting uneasily under her grip. "Mr. Carter, please." "You took them," William roared, striding forward, "without permission, across state lines. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Mary Ann's chest heaved. "I only wanted them to see, to feel something real. Look at them, William, they were laughing." "They are my daughters!" he shouted. His hands shook as he reached for Emma, his face taut with both fury and terror. "You don't get to decide what's best for them." Mary Ann held her ground, her moss-green eyes shimmering but steady. "And what has all your money given them, William?" Silence. Walls. "You've tried every doctor, every device, but not this. Never this." John stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. She didn't mean harm. You can see it. Look at their faces. But William's rage had momentum now. He pulled Emma down, gripping her arm too tightly in his desperation. His chest heaved as if he might break apart. Marianne reached instinctively, her hand out. Please don't frighten them. He turned on her, his voice raw. You're finished here. When I get home, you'll never come near them again. You've betrayed me. The air thickened, tense with the weight of collapse. Daisy pawed the ground. Scout barked nervously, and Eliza, still on the saddle, twisted toward her father. Her eyes, bright with something that had never lived there before, fixed on him. Then, clear and trembling, she whispered one word. Daddy. The world stopped. William froze as though struck. The fury drained from his face, replaced by disbelief. Tears welled unbidden. For years he had dreamed of hearing that word, had prayed, begged, spent fortunes to coax it from silence. And now it came, not in a sterile therapy room, not under fluorescent lights, but here, on a Kentucky hillside, in the reckless gamble of a maid. His knees buckled. He fell into the dirt, arms wrapping Emma close, his other hand reaching for Eliza. He sobbed openly, shoulders shaking. Daddy, Eliza said again, stronger this time, and Emma laughed beside her, her eyes glimmering with shared joy. Marianne stood frozen, tears sliding down her cheeks. She had braced herself for ruin, but instead she was witnessing a miracle. John removed his cap, bowed his head, whispering something like a prayer. Even Frank, stoic and controlled, cleared his throat, blinking as if dust had entered his eyes. Not far away, Sarah Jensen stood by her pickup, having driven up after worry gnawed her all morning. She had meant only to check, to make sure Marianne hadn't been hurt. Now, from her vantage at the edge of the field, she saw the billionaire crumpled in the dirt, his daughters clinging to him, one word bridging years of silence. Sarah pressed a hand to her mouth. She had always carried her brother's death like an anchor, unable to release herself from grief. But seeing Marianne risk everything and succeed planted a seed inside her. Maybe healing was possible, even for her. Maybe letting go did not mean forgetting. The Kentucky wind stirred, rustling the grass, carrying with it laughter and sobs braided into one sound. For William, it was the moment he had waited his whole life for. For Marianne, it was proof that faith in simple things could unlock what wealth could not. And for Sarah, watching unseen, it was the first flicker of freedom from a past she thought eternal. The word lingered in the air, small and mighty. Daddy. The flight back from Kentucky was unlike any other journey William Carter had taken in his life. For the first time in years, his daughters sat beside him with a spark in their eyes. Emma clutched a small wooden horse John McLean had given her, her fingers running across its smooth edges as if memorizing its shape. Eliza leaned against Marianne Brooks's shoulder, her breath steady, lips curved in a faint smile that hadn't faded since the morning. William sat across from them, his hands still trembling, replaying the moment in the pasture when his little girl had said, Daddy. One word, but it had detonated every wall inside him. His gaze often wandered to Marianne, whose moss-green eyes held exhaustion, but also quiet triumph. He had meant to rage at her forever, to end her employment with finality, but he could not after what she had unlocked. He saw her not as staff, but as something else, someone his family needed. When they returned to Dallas, the mansion no longer felt like a mausoleum. For years it had been filled with silence, expensive toys that never touched small hands, therapies measured in minutes and charts. Now the walls seemed to hum with the memory of laughter carried back from Kentucky. Scout, the aging Labrador, bounded clumsily to greet them, tail thumping so hard it rattled the umbrella stand. He sniffed the twins, licking Eliza's hand, and wagged harder when Emma held up the wooden horse for him to inspect. Even the dog seemed to sense a page had turned. The following days unfolded differently. William, for once, let go of rigid schedules. He canceled several therapy sessions, instead allowing the girls long mornings in the backyard, where Marianne spread blankets and read softly while the twins sat nearby. Sometimes they didn't look at her, Sometimes they reached for the toys she offered. Small signs, but more than he had seen in years. He joined them too, kneeling on the grass, describing the shapes of clouds. Emma once pointed to a cloud and laughed softly as if trying to copy his words. William's heart swelled until it hurt. The estate grounds shifted too. Sarah Jensen, the gardener, came by more often. She was tall and lean, with sun-browned arms and a stooped posture from years bent over soil. She had lived long in quiet grief for her brother, but watching the Carter twins break their silence had stirred something new in her. She began planting flowers around the terrace, marigolds, daisies, and lavender, not because William had asked, but because she wanted the girls to see color where once there had been none. One afternoon, as she planted, she saw Mary Ann step outside, Emma and Eliza holding each of her hands. Sarah paused, her eyes prickling. Maybe, she thought, she too could learn to let the past rest. Inside, Mrs. Delaney watched all this with restrained wonder. She had served the Carters for over a decade, steady as stone, yet she had never seen such change. She noticed how William lingered more in the playroom now, how his gray eyes softened when the twins made even the smallest sound. She saw how Mary Ann's presence, calm and constant, had filled a void no doctor ever could. One evening, she told Mary Ann quietly, "You've given this house back its heartbeat." Mary Ann herself moved through these days in a state of quiet awe. She rose early, her tasks unchanged, folding laundry, preparing meals, but her steps were lighter. When she glanced at the twins, she no longer saw unreachable children. She saw two small girls slowly blooming, like flowers coaxed by spring. At night, in her small room, she thought of her parents, of the Kentucky farm, of John's words. Sometimes we heal by healing others. She felt them settle inside her like truth. She realized she had stopped running from grief. She was no longer escaping her past. She was building something new. William surprised her one evening. He stood at the threshold of the kitchen while she dried dishes. His expression was not the stern mask she had grown used to, but softer, tentative. "Mary Ann," he said, "I don't see you as staff anymore. I want you to stay here, not as an employee, but as part of us. If you'll accept it." Her throat tightened. "Part of you?" she whispered. "Yes," William said simply. "This house was a tomb before you. Now it has life again. My daughters?" They laughed. They spoke. "Because of you?" Mary Ann lowered her eyes, tears burning. She nodded slowly. "Then I'll stay." The days that followed were gentler. In the mornings, William often took the girls outside with Scout bounding ahead. Mary Ann brewed coffee, sometimes joining Sarah in the garden. They spoke little, but their silence was companionable. Sarah confessed one day that she had begun writing letters to her late brother, not to send, but to release. "It helps," she said softly, dirt clinging to her hands. Mary Ann squeezed her arm. Both women understood loss. Both were finding their way through it. Emma and Eliza grew braver. They began reaching for objects, pointing, making small noises when pleased. Once, while Mary Ann hummed a lullaby from her childhood, Eliza echoed a note, a clear high sound. William, listening from the hall, pressed a hand to the wall, tears stinging his eyes. At dusk, when golden light poured through the tall windows, William sometimes caught himself staring at the scene. Mary Ann seated with the twins curled against her, Scout dozing at their feet, the house filled with quiet but no longer empty. He understood then what he had never wanted to admit, that money and doctors had not been enough. What saved his daughters was something simpler: presence, patience, and love. One evening, as the sun lowered into amber haze, William took the reins of a gentle gelding the estate had recently boarded. He walked slowly across the yard, the horse's hooves soft on the grass. Mary Ann followed, holding Emma's hand in one palm and Eliza's in the other. The twins clutched their small wooden horse and a scrap of lavender Sarah had given them. Scout trailed behind, tail wagging. The light cast them all in warm silhouette, man, woman, children, dog, and horse walking together as if stitched into a single picture. For William, it was no longer a scene of wealth, but of wholeness. For Marianne, it was peace at last, her parents' memory alive in her new purpose. For the twins, it was a family, not defined by silence, but by belonging. And as the evening wrapped them in its glow, the Carter house, once a hollow shell, was lit anew, not by chandeliers or polished glass, but by the simple miracle of laughter, love, and second chances. At the end of this story, we are reminded that healing often begins not with wealth, titles, or perfect plans, but with small acts of patience and love. Sometimes the doors that seem forever closed in life are waiting for a gentle touch, a quiet moment, or the courage to believe in simple things. In our own lives, whether with family, friends, or even strangers, we may find that the light we seek is born in everyday kindness and presence. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a reminder of hope. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so you will not miss the next story. May God bless you and your loved ones with peace and strength. If you believe in the power of love and second chances, type Amen in the comments to join others who carry the same faith.